Hello, hello. Today I'm going to be doing a bit of a guided meditation thingamabob. You know, a lot of my sort of riff videos, which is you can kind of class this as one of my riff videos because there's no premeditated thought going on. It's just a speaking of whatever comes out. Um, yeah, I want for this to be a kind of meditation on the nature of flow, a kind of roundabout waffle. I'll be speaking a little bit. But of course, the purpose of this isn't for you to just hang on every word that I say, but really for you to introspect and look inwards into what flow feels like to you. I'm only going to be offering pointers. I'm not going to be trying to explain and conceptualize flow for you into something that is a succinct, logical definition. What I'm trying to do, like I said, is to offer kind of words and pointers for you to try and look inwards and to understand, what I am pointing to when I use the word flow. And flow, by its sort of obvious connotations, is a quite a watery, streaming concept. It sort of points to a sense of movement, a sense of transition and change. And the question is like, what is changing when I'm flowing? What is it that is changing? People often think of flow as a kind of conscious state that they can slip into when they're meaningfully engaged in some kind of purposeful activity, whether it be work, sport, meditation, writing. And I think it's good to distinguish flow from conscious states where we think we're not in flow. And when we're not in flow, there's a kind of conscious tension, there's a kind of conscious contraction, a fragmentation of our conscious awareness. And this fragmentation can seem frustrating, it seems stifling. We can't really concentrate, where our mind is being dragged off into this or that place, and we're not able to find this kind of seamless um, concentration with a kind of momentum. There's a sense of real momentum to the movement when we're in flow, and that's why it's often quite difficult to go straight into it. Flow is really something that you have to build up to, and you'll know when you're there because there is a subtle silencing of your mind. There's a subtle cessation of thought. It's not to say that thought completely disappears, but rather thought becomes appropriately aligned with the activity that you're engaging with. A thought can often distract us out of flow when we find ourselves thinking and worrying about things other than the activity that we're engaged in. We find our minds distracted and our attention deviating. When we're in flow, our attention is very sharply fixated on the task at hand. And maybe sharply isn't the right word because there is a very strong effortless component to it. There's limited resistance when you're in flow. Attention seems to move in a kind of exploratory manner as it sort of continually unfolds what it is you're doing. And I think it's important to put our fingers on this exploratory component to flow and to how our attention is moving in the state of flow. You know, I often find flow when I'm sort of researching, learning, and following my curiosity in things. You know, it's whether you're on a Wikipedia rabbit hole, for example, and there's a sense of curiosity about what you're really unveiling when you're learning about something, and you find yourself almost lost in that activity, and that losing yourself in the activity or flow is a kind of suspension almost of egocentric processes, and that's where the slight silencing of mind comes into play, which I mentioned earlier. Because it's like our egoic processes are subsumed under the general movement of our being and our awareness. They become not the master, but the servant to what we're engaging in. I guess this sort of ties into the whole notion of ego dissolution and psychedelic experiences. Anyone who has explored psychedelic experiences knows that the conscious state that you are acquainted with is a very flowing one. You become very sharply attuned to the nature of flux, to the nature of movement that comprises reality. And the ego is it's a kind of stifling psychic complex when it becomes overly involved in activity. When it becomes overly involved in activity, the things that we're doing, it it prevents us from entering flow because it sort of almost creates this tension point, and we're not able to center ourselves in silence, but our center becomes misaligned. We become caught up in egocentric agendas. If you're in a social situation, you're talking to someone, you're not really able to really be there, listen, and be present, but your attention is very tense and it's ruminating upon things, matters related to yourself. That's very much at the root of social anxiety, which I think a lot of people can relate to. This self consciousness, not in a positive manner, but in an excessively evaluating manner, where you're unable to allow your attention to move freely. Your attention is really trapped and into these sort of rigid cycles of self evaluation. And that can often come when, say, you're trying to write or do anything. You're unable to flow because you're constantly finding your attention caught up within evaluating the movement. And that creates this that prevents the stream of your awareness to really move freely. It sort of makes it jagged. When you're in flow, that notion of self-evaluation, that notion of questioning what you are doing, whether it's right, whether it's correct, it seems to cease, and there is just the activity, like what I'm talking about right now. You're really witnessing me think out loud, pretty much, and there's this sense of openness, really, because I'm not sitting and worrying about whether I'm going to say the right thing, because I don't know what the right thing to say. It's just a thing that arises, really. Could say something, but what more is there to say? You know, I suppose in that sort of silence that passes, and you're there waiting and lingering on the next thing for me to say. You just really look into what that waiting feels like. What is this silence that lies between thought? Because we live so much in our heads, jumping from thought to thought, wondering. The mind just wants to be directed towards something. It can't really sit with that ambiguity of no thought, of no direction. It wants to be doing something. This is why meditation is often quite a uncomfortable experience for the mind, because it is so used to being directed out into the world in some kind of meaningful, purposive direction. This is why a lot of people are addicted to work, for example, because they can't sit with this kind of distress of not doing anything, of inactivity. So you force yourself to do stuff. You force yourself into activity, into the yang, the yin-yang kind of reference. The yang is the active masculine component of action. It's the forward motion that really actualizes things into existence. But the important thing about flow is that flowing state, it sort of aligns both the yin and the yang component to movement. And the yin component is, you can think of it as more the passive receptivity to our experience, when we're not forcing things, but we're rather sitting back and remaining open to the ideas to arise. And meditation is very much when people frame it not as an activity, but as a cessation of activity, in that movement of your mind, you are tapping more into that sort of intuitive, receptive, conscious center. When you're not trying to force the thought, you're not trying to force the action, you're just opening yourself to become receptive to its natural arising. And it's that openness is a passive action. It's a preparation. It's, like when you contract a muscle and release it, you're relaxing that muscle, right? And that relaxation allows you to return back to the center, eventually to contract that muscle again. You're going in and out. It's important not to overly emphasize either side of that balance between going in and out. You need to find a kind of equilibrium and a kind of steady oscillation between those two things, particularly when you're in flow. Because in flow, you are kind of balanced. It's a balanced kind of conscious state, and there's a balanced movement to it, where you are sort of aligning both that yin and that yang component to action and motion. We breathe, and breathing goes in and out. The breath is something that is so raw and primordial to our organismic existence. It's what is keeping us alive. Yet we often don't think about how we're breathing, and this fundamental nature to the breath, and how the breath is really a kind of center to our conscious experience as well. That's why when people are often first taught to meditate, they are told to orient their attention towards their breath, because that orientation of their attention, it it brings them to something that is always, ever present, you know. Yeah, meditation, really, you are sitting with that thing that is silent yet always there. It's the kind of vacuum, the vacuum, the spacious field in which everything arises as a kind of movement or pattern. Wonder what I'm going to say next. Guess you're finding out with me. But I think I'll leave that at that. Um, yeah, it's been quite interesting for me just to, especially in these riff videos, because it's a kind of it's a in the moment introspection into what thoughts are there percolating in your pre-conscious, and it's always interesting to sort of unearth more and more because I wasn't necessarily really thinking about the nature of yin and yang and how that sort of coalesces in our movements. But I guess it's relevant, It's I guess that's what happens when you free associate. Things just come up. But I guess I'll end the video there. That's been interesting. Um, should I say anything else? Should I say like and subscribe and all that YouTube jazz? Yeah, just be curious about yourself, because we are all the mystery at the end of the day. But yeah, I'm gonna stop there, otherwise I'll end up waffling more and more. Thumbs up.